When you hear us making our voice, making our case, we need support. We need you to know what we're facing. Let's come together in every industry, in every dimension of work, get united, and let's help each other.
This conversation illustrates that we have to work together to deal with these corporate concentration issues, which we face whether we're in New York City or we're in Alvaro, Iowa. Unfortunately, our differences get used against us when in reality we have so much in common that we need to capitalize in order to make a real difference.
Welcome to The Fair Fight, a show for you and your fight against corporate power. I'm Max Miller, an antitrust attorney, a corporate skeptic, and a prairie populist. And joining me, former FTC Commissioner Alvaro Bedoya, a man who took on corporate power for you, and the president fired him for it.
Every day we're told that the defining fight of our lives is Democrat versus Republican. We're told to worry about the left versus the right. Max and me are a lot more worried about the money at the top versus all of us underneath. And we think that needs to be a fair fight. So we're taking your questions, sharing your stories, and getting you answers about your rights in this economy.
So put on those boxing gloves, tighten up those laces, and enter the arena, because it's time to join the fair fight. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to The Fair Fight with Alvaro and Max. Today is Friday, April 24th. And Alvaro, do you want to tell our listeners what we're going to be talking about today?
Absolutely. So welcome, everyone. It is a beautiful day here in Maryland. It is also
Iowa.
A beautiful day in Iowa. So despite everything else, we should all enjoy that. But folks, we have a really exciting episode for you this morning. And it gets at something that Max and I lived for 3 years when we were fighting monopolies and fraudsters and all these corporate behemoths at the Federal Trade Commission, which is our country's competition and consumer protection agency. We would go to big cities and small towns across the country. We would meet with grocers, pharmacists, labor unions, shrimpers. And the thing we started seeing, as you might imagine, that these are folks living very different lives and having very different fights and problems with the corporate behemoths that dominate their work lives. In reality, you see this thread connecting all of them, which is that their ability to provide for themselves, their families, their communities is really shaped and sometimes controlled by these monopolies and duopolies that dominate their work lives. So today, we wanted to bring that conversation to you, because the frustrating thing is that Max and me and our colleague Catherine and others, we would go to these places and we would live it, right? But we could never show other people what we were talking about. And so we're doing little experiments with the show. Today, we want to bring that conversation to you with two extraordinary human beings, two leaders from what may seem like very different industries. We have Aaron, who is the president of the Iowa Farmers Union, and Amadou, who is a leader in the New York Taxi Workers Alliance, who works rideshare. And so with Max's help, we will bring them in, we'll introduce them to you, and we're going to talk about that thread that ties them together. I see Aaron. Welcome, Aaron. And welcome, Amadou. So let me start by asking each of you a little bit about your lives, where you're calling from. Amadou, I see you are in a car. You got the shades on. Looks like it's a nice day in New York City. Where are you calling from, sir? And tell us a little about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Amadou Diallo. I come from West Africa, my country name Republic of Guinea. And it is the place where I was born. I grew up. I came in United States like let's say 8 or 9 years ago, and I was led by something that they call American dream. So I was dreaming like every child from little village in Africa. So yes, I made it. For someone who know exactly where I come from, he can understand. Being in New York already, it's for me it's a huge success, because in the beginning I was born a place where we even did not have access to the school. We couldn't see car in my village.
Wow.
It's small village, and it's way, way, way away here from here in Africa. So for me, even being here, it's something already. And I grow up there, and the place where I grow up is completely different that I discover in the life, because I grew up a place where everyone know everyone. We know all each other. We was not a lot of people, and since since I was child, my parent was like a farmer, but they make choice for me and do all their best to help me to go to school. It was not easy. I remember when I was child going to school, it took me like 1 hour every morning to walk, and there was no car, no bike, nothing. Hard work, to walk. But they pushed me. They done all their best to bring me on certain place. And since I started learning step by step, and I discovered the life was not just what I used to know in that village. And since I discovered what I mean, America and everything by TV, and I started dreaming. I said, so yeah, this life exists, it's possible. And, I promised my mom one day, I said, you know what? I don't know if you will still alive until that moment, but I will do all my best to make you proud. You see the place where we born, it's a poor place. We are poor. We don't have nothing. Even access to school was not easy, but I will do all my best. I hope one day you will be, proud of me. I promise you. And I took a long way. Fortunately, I got success by having visa coming to United States. But before being here, I went to school. I graduated college. So I study sociological politics at university in my country. It's a little bit different than here, because when I arrived here, I was like someone who have never been at school. Sometimes it's happening to people to joke on me because I couldn't speak one word in English. I come from a country where we speak French. So when I get here, it was simple for me. And I was feeling like, oh no, look like I've never been at school. So that's the beginning of, my way now. I'm here, I live here since last 8 years. I'm married. I have two wonderful daughters. And I live with my wife, and I'm driving Uber. And recently also, I integrated the auxiliary police in New York City. I work with the police, NYPD.
What a wonderful American dream story. And coming here, I'll tell you, I'm struck by something, Amadou, right? Because you said your father was a farmer, and Aaron here is also a farmer, and Aaron, your father was also a farmer. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself, Aaron?
Yeah, so I'm a fifth generation farmer on this farm here in central Iowa, and we grow corn, soybeans, oats, hay, and we do it with my son, who's the sixth generation. We're trying to bring him onto the farm as well. And in our farm here, we are surrounded by farmers who are farm all sorts of things here in Iowa, but we're predominantly growing small grains and corn here, and soybeans. And I also get to serve as president of the Iowa Farmers Union. So it's a great opportunity to interact with farmers all around the state.
One thing that jumps out at me before we get into it is how both of you, your work for each of you, Amadou and Aaron, is this paragon of America, right? Aaron, you are growing the food we eat the fuel for some of our cars. And you are in the heartland of this country in Iowa, I think, which occupies a particular place in the American heart and mind. And Amadou, as you're saying what you're saying, obviously I feel a kinship with you because I came to this country through New York City. We landed at John F. Kennedy Airport in 1987 in October, and for some of the same reasons that you did. But I'm the words in my mind are that New York, New York. If I can make it here, I'll make it anywhere. Then I'm forgetting that. What's it? Da 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 da. New York. What's the way? But anyways, it's.
You're quoting Frank Sinatra here.
I know I am. I'm quoting the chairman of the
If
board.
I can make it there, I'll make it
anywhere.
Anywhere. It's up to you.
It's up to you, New York, New York. But Amadou, going to New York City, which I think is the greatest city in our country.
I disagree with that. I lived there for 3 years.
Working hard and hustling. I grew up in upstate New York. Working hard and hustling and just making it for your family, making it for your wife. That is you two are embodying the American dream. And I think the question we want to talk to you about is, how does this country do right by both of you? By giving you guys in your work the playing field you need to be successful, not to have a handout, but to just be able to compete. And so, Max, I don't know if you can jump us into that conversation.
So when we talk about the economy, right, there's a number of different factors that can play a part in it. One are the actual participants in the economy, so large corporations, and then you also have policies that are made by the government that can have an effect on the economy. And what we're seeing right now in the last few months is a major policy decision was made to go to war with Iran. And one of the clear effects that we've seen about that is rising fuel costs. Gas prices have gone through the roof, but it's not just gas prices. So first, Amadou, I'd like to turn to you. As a driver for a rideshare company, how have the increasing gas prices affected your business?
Thank you so much. As a driver, I'm Uber and Lyft driver and, taxi driver in New York. And you know how the life in New York is intense, never stop day and night. About the gas increase, what we have to know first is well before this moment, we was already in crisis in the industry. It's not in the beginning now. Since last 5 years, after we went out of the pandemic, the driver in New York was feeling the impact. Why? Because we wouldn't have a lot people since they start remote work in a lot of business. People don't take Uber no longer like before the pandemic. And after that, what people have to know, Uber, Lyft, since the last 2 years, they started implementing one system called lockout. That lockout means if you are a driver, the TLC, the Taxi Limousine Commission, are the agency who reglement the Uber, the taxi in New York. So that what they used to do.
So Amadou, in a few minutes, we're going to talk about the lockout, and that issue. And I'd love for you to describe exactly that issue. Are there any costs aside from gas prices that, are you paying more
absolutely.
for license? Okay. So what are you paying for?
Okay, let me go by the statistic. Before this war starting last month, usually in my car I use the gas that they call premium. It's more good for the engine. And usually, if I want to full of my tank, I have to pay like $80 full. That's helped me to work all the 12 to 13 hours because every day I work 12 to 13 hours, otherwise I cannot make it. So since this war started and the price went skyrocket by the roof, and what I found out, the difference between that moment and now what I'm paying, if I keep paying the premium, the difference is sometimes $30 a day. That's every single day.
Wow.
Because I used to pay between 75 to 80. Now I pay until 110 to 115. This is the way how it went up. And why? Because we have a premium, we have a regular, and we have extra. What's happening to me, special because I talk about my experience. The guy who used to work on my car maintenance, he look at my car. He say, "You have luxury car. It's Acura MDX." He tell me, if you wanna keep this engine last longer, you have to use the premium gas.
Yeah.
You see, so that's why I don't buy regular gas like just a regular driver. I drive all day and take time. So when I started, after this war came up, I found out I couldn't make it because the rise pay never changed. The average pay, the rate still been the same. So finally, I decided to go down. Now I pay regular gas like everybody, but I start already feeling the change on my engine because now in my engine, sometimes when I'm driving in the street, you see the smoke coming more and more. And when I talk to the guy, he say, "Absolutely, I prevent you. Don't do that because if you do that, that's gonna impact your car." So if I was expecting like have this car, I like it, I drive it, it's helped me to make it. If I was expecting having the engine on real life for the next 5 years, now I can say maybe 3 years, 3.5, but I'm not sure I can go over than that because I have already changed. And the guy who know the car better than everyone because he work on every time, he told me, "I know it's gonna be a little expensive, but do that sacrifice. Use the premium because it's more refined gas and it's good quality." This is the way how it
But what
impacted me directly. Yeah.
Yeah, what I'm hearing from you, Amadou, then is like because of rising costs, you have to make choices, and some of those choices are actually, going to cause for longer term problems.
Right.
But it's like you don't have the choice. And Aaron, I know because I know agriculture much better than I know New York City rideshare driving. I'm sure you have very similar types of stories about hard choices that have to be made because of costs.
Yeah, for us, it means short-term pain and long-term really bad decisions that you have to choose between. For us, this crisis has caught the industry completely off guard. So much of the fertilizer that we use as farmers comes from overseas. We've already had overseas disruptions because of terrible trade policy, tariff policy. So we had already had disruption, and we only had a couple players to choose between. So when this happens, the price of fertilizer immediately went up. And for a lot of it depends on where you are, and some farmers have purchased beforehand. Some needed to purchase at the time this was actually happening and really took it on the chin. But we all are going to feel it because this is going to last. This disruption is going to last a long time. So people are already thinking, how am I going to get a crop in this year? And how in the world am I going to pay for a crop for next year? Sometimes those purchases happen in just a couple months for next year's crop. So I feel Amadou understanding, hey, we got short-term crisis situation, but this means in the long term, we're going to have to make some very, very hard decisions that hurt us in the long term.
And what I think for all of our listeners should understand too, that in both of these cases, rising gas prices like affect the cost of everything. So
Yeah.
that means that your rideshare drive is going to cost more, in the end. But it's like all the products that you buy in the store because they don't get to the store without being shipped from one point to another. But then, what Aaron is talking about here is that our food prices, which are already like we are in an affordability crisis, that the average American is struggling to put food on their table. And we're talking about future prices going up on these.
Can I
Alvaro.
ask just to drill down, Aaron? I thought it was super valuable to hear from Amadou when he drilled down. He said, "Look, the gas I need to make this vehicle, which is my livelihood run, used to cost $80 for a full tank. Now it's 110 or 115. you're getting hit. Your folks are probably, I think most of your folks probably already locked in fertilizer prices, but a lot haven't.
Mm-hmm.
And you're also going to get hit by fuel prices. So those are two different angles. Could you talk in a little more detail about what's happening to the prices of fertilizer, maybe specifically nitrogen, and what's happening to fuel prices for your folks that you represent and work for?
Yeah, so I am by no means a large farmer, 500 acres or so. The I have the similar experiences with the other farmers in our organization about this size. So by no means a large conglomerate farm or anything, that they report $25,000 in extra expenses just because of the rise in fertilizer prices. And that is, again, without any warning. The industry didn't see it coming. The policy leaders didn't see it coming. There was not buildup to try to find alternatives. So where do you make that up? You have only so many places where you can tighten your belt to make that up. In addition to that, like you said, the crop that we grow last year is still being delivered. And the truck services that we hire have to put in an additional surcharge for every single load that leaves the farm here. It costs us more to get it to market. And those are just that all those costs are going to get passed on to the consumer. So the farmer on the ground is not going to benefit, but the consumer is not going to benefit either. We're all going to feel this pain.
Let me just say something that I want folks viewing this and listening to this to understand, which is most people know that rideshare drivers often work lots of different jobs.
Yeah.
So, it sounds like you, Amadou, work 12 to 13 hours. A lot of the folks I know work rideshare, work it in conjunction with other jobs they might have. They might have a service industry job. They might have a desk job during the day, but just to pay for added expenses, they drive at night or vice versa. The same is true of farmers. I'm just thinking of our friend of the show, Josh Mansky, who, he has the family farm. He has his own ag real estate business, and there's an irrigation business. And on top of all that, he's working with the farmers union like you are, Aaron. And so these are not high margin jobs. These are not high margin lines of work. And so when you're looking at an added 40% or 35% in gas prices for you, Amadou, and an added $25,000 just in the fertilizer prices for, a farm of 500 acres before even the fuel prices of getting your product to market or where it's going to get processed.
Yeah.
That is a huge strain on your family's bottom lines. That is what jumps out to me.
Yeah, and for so many, and unfortunately, what's happening is folks who weren't able to lock in lower prices earlier are usually those folks who are more vulnerable, financially vulnerable, might be new or beginning farmers, might be leveraged farmers. Some were waiting for an assistance package that was coming from the USDA because of trade chaos.
They promised that they were going to help out farmers before they created this crisis.
They promised they were going to help. And of course, we were waiting. A lot of farmers were waiting for that assistance to hit their checking account before they could lock in and pay for fertilizer prices. And they had to wait. And by the time they finally got the payment, the fertilizer prices have gone up. And now they're really in an even more vulnerable position. The other thing that hurts us here is we have a clean water problem, and the best recommendations we get from our folks at the Land Grant University here is try to balance out the application of your fertilizer until you see what the ground conditions are. Not always is it best to buy it up front and apply it all at once. So using those best practices, those farmers using those best practices, they're getting penalized because they weren't able to lock in all of their fertilizer because they were waiting to see what the ground conditions were like before deciding how much more to put on. So we're punishing the most vulnerable farmers in this situation and the farmers using the best practices for conservation. That's not a way to promote the farming practices we want to see and to promote to get new and beginning farmers into farming.
So, Aaron, it sounds like, I mean, part of the issue is, of course, policy, right? But part
Yeah.
of the issue, as you mentioned about fertilizer, right, is there's very few fertilizer companies to buy from. There's concentration in that industry. But one area that I wanted to talk to both of you about, and Amadou, we're going to go to you next here, is when you actually sell your product. So, Amadou, you're selling your driving skills to people, and Aaron, you're selling your and both of you have what I would call middlemen, right? Like Aaron, you know, it's hard for you to sell your crops directly to consumers, and Amadou, it's hard for you to find people who need a ride without using a middleman. So, what kind of options do you guys have for the middlemen? So, Amadou, how many choices do you have of how to drive in New York City? What are all? Tell us about all your choices.
Wonderful. Everywhere where you have concurrence, it can be helpful for customer and those who use it. But here in New York, we have particularity when it's about the rideshare. When Uber and Lyft arrived to the market, there was other company like, everyone know the traditional taxi in New York is yellow cab and green. But when they get in, what they started doing is pushing, like investing a lot money. Like they spend until make sure they spread everywhere, they expand themselves, and they kill first one, the yellow cab dead. They still be here, but I know everyone know about how they function because it went low down. Everyone are quitting the yellow every day. And green you cannot even talk about because you cannot even see them in New York. There was other company like they call it Juno. In the beginning, it was good, but what Uber did, they put a lot of money, invest, push people to know what Uber and give them like a very cheap price in the beginning, and push driver get them hired. I remember when I went to the Uber like 6 years ago. The same day I went to the Uber hub, the same day I started driving. Not easy to get in, get higher. And what they used to do in that moment, like if you, they can give you promotion as a driver. They don't pay too much, but they give you promotion. Do this 15 trip, do those 20 trip, we give you $100, we give you $50. So when they was doing that, make sure everyone now get into, and they make change. They start rising the price for the customer and keep paying low and abandon definitely all those promotion that they used to do does not exist no longer. And at the same time, the other company like Juno, they couldn't make it compete with Uber no more. And all those companies dead. They went, bankrupt and couldn't do nothing. So the only one who survived in the Uber policy in New York is Lyft. Lyft tried to do, but even Lyft cannot make like how Uber doing. So me as an immigrant, I have to do Uber. Let me tell you why quickly. The first, uh, I need to go. I went to school, I graduate in university, but if I have to go do something very well here, I have to go back to school, start by learning English. It's not easy for me. I have family. And also, this job is a like flexible job. If I do that as the immigrant, if I want to go back home, see family 1 month, 2 weeks, and come back, it's possible. If I want to go to school, learning English and anything other, it's possible because the job is flexible. This is the only, I think, actually advantage that we have with Uber. So we following them. We work on the company because of those kind of advantage. It's not because we earn more on other. So if we have, if we wanna go like work with the company, it's gonna be, you have some company like Access Ride in New York. But it's like if you drive those disability person, they work with a company named CTG. It those one give the government, get from government customer, and it's not a lot of people. Like you work early in the morning or later evening. That's it. So you cannot make it. If you have to quit Uber for any other option, is not going to be driving no more. You have to find something else to do. In the city, it's possible. But if you are immigrant like me, you want to integrate it, you have to go to school and go through all those things. You have to stay working with Uber. That's why we are in.
But Amadou, because like so it sounds like the only real options that a driver in New York City have is to go to Lyft or to go to Uber, right? And I know that some perhaps even do both. Do those companies actually end up competing against each other? Like, does one offer like more compensation, to the drivers, or do you find that they like do the same things? And both of them are, hurting the drivers.
They do the same thing. And when it's about the pay, everything is regulated by this TLC, Taxi Limousine Commission. This is the agency who implement the pay rate in New York. But the way how Uber and Lyft do, they always find a way how to cheat that, and they compete between them. But when it's about, remember when lockout arrived, Uber started, and when Lyft found out people was getting hurt and moving more to the Lyft, and they started doing the same lockout. So they compete. But every time one implement one system where they make more money, the other one go at the same system. So nothing like make it really different.
So hold that thought. We just had Amadou talking about lockouts that keep Amadou from being able to do his work. Let me quickly say before I turn to you, Aaron, I lived what you described from the rider side, not the driver side here in DC. So I used to live in DC, what people say DC proper, within the actual boundaries of Washington. And I remember when I was a young staffer in Congress, you could get a ride across town in DC in the early days of Uber for like $6.25. It was completely surreal. And around that time, DC was a cab city. You could just walk out the door and hail a cab and actually get a cab to take you somewhere. But now there are you cannot find a cab on the street to hail. It just does not happen because all those folks, and in New York City, you have to rent the medallion. All those folks went bankrupt and they went into Uber and a little bit of Lyft. And so Uber used the venture capital money sloshing around it to artificially press down the prices to consumers low, artificially inflate what they were paying to drivers, at least temporarily inflate what they were paying to drivers. The drivers switch over to Uber, a little Lyft. The riders just start saying, oh, I guess I just got to do Uber and Lyft. The taxis go out of business, and suddenly you have a duopoly who is doing lockouts. So hold that thought with lockouts. And Aaron,
because I was going to say farmers know nothing about concentration on the buyer market, which the fun fancy word is called monopsony power, right? So Aaron, tell us a little bit about your experience in trying to sell your products. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's really just so few players that that are around to purchase what we want. Even the local terminal, if we have a local option, is reselling into those large players that artificially suppress prices. So just as a reminder, in Iowa, we still have a very broad network of family farmers. Some of them are large, some of them are small, but thousands and thousands of independent family farmers. That's the strength of a system, is to have that diversity so that we are not reliant on just one or two farms for producing the food for our country and the fuel for the raw materials for a lot of fuel for our country. But that all gets bottlenecked once we start to sell what we have to sell, just to a couple of players. And it's to the point where even the alternatives to those big two, those big three, big four, the price is still being set by those big ones, right? Everything is based on the price being offered because they control so much of the market. That goes for where we sell our corn, for our soybeans, for our cattle, for our hogs, for our chickens. Everything we grow here, it all has a very consolidated marketplace that artificially suppresses prices. And how's that show up? People are paying more for food. You'd think that farmers would be getting paid more for growing food. It's not that way. And the USDA tracks how much of the food dollar actually returns to the farm. And I think it's shocking for a lot of folks to hear that that is less than 15 cents of the
And it
food
used to
dollar.
be, Aaron, like if I remember correctly, in the 1950s and 60s, it was up around 45 cents
Of
of
the
every
grocery
food.
dollar going to the pocket of farmers like Aaron.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Let me
Oh,
allow me to jump in, because what he Aaron talking about, we have similarity in the taxi industry. Let me tell you a little bit about it. It's an insurance. You know, in New York, we pay car insurance high than everywhere in the world. It's not only in the United States, because I have experience out of here. But the insurance that we pay in here, as a taxi driver, especially this time, because the main company insurance who used to give us insurance now, what they pretending they are going by bankrupt. Let me give you some facts. For the last 3 years, the way how my insurance went up, I have liability. It's not full coverage. I have liability. And even that, the amount that they put for me in case if I have any collision, it's now more than 25,000. After that, if I make something problematic, I have to take care of it. So I have to be very careful. Before around 2023, I was paying $360. From that, today, actually, I'm paying $580 for the last 3 years. This is the way how it went up, and I have good record on my my license. That's why I don't go over that 600.
but
Otherwise, if you
but
go
so
by
the
yes.
Yeah, I just want to say so the listeners understand what Amadou is saying here is that the price just to protect his own liability, just if he does something wrong, that's going through the roof. And he doesn't even have coverage. He can't afford the coverage that would protect him if something happened to his car and he needed
Yeah,
to replace his car.
that's the
Um,
liability. Yeah.
yeah, so that and those types of input costs, right, to doing our business, that's what we see is that with concentration in the markets, that those prices go up. Aaron, I wanted to go back to you because one thing that Amadou was saying about his prior situation there with Lyft was, kind of the incentive that they're when they enter the market, they're trying to actually get people onto the network, right? And all of
Sure.
that. And then they do like a bait and switch. And I wanted to ask you about a market that's near and dear to my heart. I don't think do you raise any cattle, Aaron?
Not right now, no.
No, but I'm sure with your members of the Iowa Farmers Union, you know about this. This reminds me a lot about in beef production that there was this what I would call a bait and switch system that the Packers engaged in,
Yeah.
where they basically promised a premium to people to switch over to what's called a forward contract, where they're going to buy the beef in advance. And what they were doing was systematically destroying the cash market. The
Yeah.
cash market is where farmers are just it's an auction and people are bidding on it.
Like I got for $6. Yeah, exactly. Like the actual
Yeah,
old school. Yes, which I've
but
never
by
got to see as a commissioner. I really wanted to. Yeah.
But by destroying the cash market, even the forward contracts went down in price, right? Because they were tied to the cash market. So it's a bait and switch where the Packers were like, we're going to give you this short-term benefit so that we can screw you in the long term.
Yeah, it happens a lot, right? You in order to capture that customer, that part, there's there are short-term gains to it, but the long-term stability of the marketplace just continues to go down and down and down to the point where it sometimes it almost doesn't even exist, right? You can't even identify what the independent free market is because so much of it is tied in to a contract that is not based any longer on any independent market.
So let me we have about 15 minutes left with you gentlemen, and so I want to make sure to get to this question of software lockouts that Amadou mentioned. And let's back into Amadou. So let's start with you, Aaron. You and the families that you represent at the Iowa Farmers Union, you make really big investment in the machinery you use on the farm, whether it's a tractor, a combine, or something else. Could you talk about how software lockouts affect your folks and why you're so worried about them.
Yeah, let's remember this equipment sometimes costs $500,000 to $750,000, close to $1 million on some high-end equipment. And farmers for years have been fixing their own equipment. That sometimes they use an independent repair person, sometimes they'll use the dealers, but as equipment gets more sophisticated, we rely on the software to make everything work together, right? So what is happening now, farmers are finding that they may know what part they need. They may have the part they need. They may know how to install the part they need. They can install it and do it all, but they still cannot get their machine up and running. And the reason for that is because they might have a particular software code that needs to be entered in order for the machine to actually work and get back out to the field. Or it may require a certain program that only the dealer's repair person has. So that costs money, right? You have to pay for permission to get your part and your machine running, even though you know how to fix it. You might be delayed, waiting to harvest a crop that's starting to turn bad in the field, waiting to plant a crop in a very short planting window because of weather conditions. All these things add up to more costs for farmers. And it makes it harder to make a living farming because you have this software gatekeeper that is standing between you and a fixed machine.
And Aaron, because it's a gatekeeper, sometimes then it leads to delays for even the farmer to get into the dealer, even if you're willing to go pay that extra cost, right? Like my understanding is that it's like if it's harvest time and a couple of, pieces of equipment are going down at the same time, everybody then is trying to go to the local dealer, and it's like they might not be able to get to you for a couple of days, and that's each day at harvest time or planting time, right, is critical.
It's it's money. Each day that you can't be out harvesting, it's costing you money. So yes, those delays are real, and these dealers, in order to keep their local dealership, they're abiding by the John Deere rules, the Case IH rules. They're placed in this position where they're stopping from equipment getting fixed for their farmers who they're neighbors. They work with us. They're valuable people in our community, and they're doing their best. But because of the corporate policy, they have to put these these software gates in the way, and that's just wrong. It's costly and it's not fair.
So, Aaron, you're talking about how a family might invest $500,000 or more in a piece of farming equipment. There's only so many places you can get that equipment, so many companies. But when it breaks, now, not before, but now they code that software so that you can't fix it. Your neighbor down the street who runs an independent repair shop can't fix it. Only they can fix it. And when it's time for fixes, because harvest time is harvest time, it's not like there's a harvest time for one group of farmers, 1 month, and the next, it generally overlaps. When stuff breaks, it piles up. It doesn't get fixed unless you pay that extra money. Amadou, you are in New York City. You talked about Uber and Lyft locking people out. Tell us what that's about. Tell us what that feels like, what happens. How has that affected you? How has that affected your colleagues in the New York Taxi Workers Alliance? And if you could just assume that most folks listening to this probably don't live in New York City, maybe give them a little background as to how those lockouts came about.
Okay, in New York, like I said previously, the TLC is Taxi Limousine Commission. This is the agency who reglement and put all the legislation in how the taxi industry rule in New York here. They had one policy. It was a little bit good for the driver. Like they implemented, say, if you take this ride, as in like Uber, you are the share company. You have to pay the driver for this thing, this ride, this average mileage and by mileage and by minute. And now here the thing, if as a driver you are in the platform, you work like 10 hours, but in those 10 hours, what they will check the average between the time that you was busy, like having customer in your car, and the time you stay empty, but you are in the platform. And by the end of every year, they go into and see how the driver was busy. And if they find out the driver was not enough busy having enough trip, what they say to the company, okay, we seen this, the driver, despite they don't have a customer, they still been in the platform. So they need to be paid on this average, otherwise they cannot keep making it because they don't get enough customer, and they only get paid if they got customer in the car. So you have to find a way how to, to to regulate, help them to earn more rather than saying empty and done without making money. And Uber and Lyft finding that they didn't like it because what they found out is not good for for them. They didn't like it, however. They make money, but for them it's not enough. So they have to do something.
That's the
And
key. That's the key point there, right? They made money, just not enough.
they're not enough. Exactly. They make money, but it's not enough. So they say now here, due to the policy and the TLC, we need the driver to side with us and fight that because policy is not good for the driver. But the most of us as native out of the native out of America, we don't know much about all those things. If you don't work with the union and other, you don't know all this policy. Some of us was believing on that, but it was not true. Now, because the union, he just mentioned New York Taxi Worker Alliance, that union is led by wonderful lady here. Her name is Barabi Desai. I know you know her. They stand up.
Total all
Say
star.
this is.
Yes.
They say no, we cannot do that. This lockout, we are not okay with that because what they are doing is not good. When they denounce that, and the driver stop siding with Uber and Lyft. Then Uber and Lyft to say, okay, because you don't want to side with us, we will punish you because we are not giving you a lot of time in the platform. Every time you stay in the platform, we give you right, but after 2-3 rides, we take you out. Then you are now in the platform without taking customer. So we don't have to pay you the normal rate. You see, this is the way how it's happening. And now what Uber was doing and Lyft, Uber started and Lyft to follow later. If you drive like 1 to 2 hours, they take you out of the platform. Then they know by the end of the year, the TLC commission, when they will check, they say, okay, this driver was on the platform on this average time. And this time, while they was there, they had customer. So they make the money that they had to make. But what they didn't know is if that lockout continue, we don't have enough time to stay in the platform. So we're not working enough. They give us 3 hours, keep us out 2 hours, 1 hour, and bring us back again. And this is what they was doing. So the New York Taxi Worker Alliance, they stand up, they fight. We fight. Finally, the previous administration, they make deal with Uber and Lyft.
Yeah.
And by the end, thanks this lady, Baravi, we win it in the court because, having just like a deal with the administration cannot work. It's not going to go well because Uber and Lyft, they have the monopoly. They can come back every time and make it change again.
Yeah.
Well,
So
it's a very clear story that I'm hearing from you, Amadou, right? Which is, number one, that unions are important, right? Like workers, small producers working together, right, can start to balance out the power of the big companies and what they're doing. But then there's this disgusting cat and mouse game that seems to be happening where when the workers get their rights enforced, then there's a change that is made. And Aaron, I'm struck by how similar this is to what you do with the Iowa Farmers Union on behalf of farmers. And so in your situation of software lockout, what have you been up to doing, and what are you seeing response from the company?
Yeah, and it sounds so similar, Amadou. I can't tell you how many times I'm thinking, boy, this is happening to farmers, just like it's happening to you. You know, the farmers are speaking up about having the right to repair. They have to work together to make it happen, because individually, farmers just do not have the political or financial clout to be on the same field. But by working together, we can demand that in Iowa we advocate for a strong right to repair law. Colorado has already gotten a right to repair law for their farmers. But that only happens if you have farmers working together to advocate for it and working together to show, hey, this is a problem. This is raising costs for all farmers. It's raising the cost for consumers. If you don't have people working together on this, it's very easy for the power of John Deere or Case IH or Uber, Lyft to just crush individuals that are divided and not speaking with a united voice on it. So we try very hard to unify people. And Amadou, I'm so grateful that you're working trying to unify rideshare drivers.
Amadou, jump in. What do you hear and feel when you listen to Aaron?
You know, we all live in the same situation. It's a different level, and it's not different. It's not the same, level, because according to what I used to hear about farmer, absolutely, they are the people who who feed us, who give us food and everything. So I understand what they're facing. But what I just want to say, according to what all that I hear from him, is that everywhere we are, we have to be united, because without being united, they will destroy us. Actually, in our industry, Uber and Lyft, they practice also something called deactivation. That means losing your job definitely. And that can happen for everything and for nothing. Let's say, I'm going to give you an example. I'm driving, one customer is in my car, and we are in the road. He is busy on his phone. And while I'm driving, something happened in front of me, like someone just got a line in front of me. And if I just hit brake one time, shouldn't stop, if the car moves, the customer feels something, For him, he don't see the action. For him, it's my fault. He don't know what happened. If he is not happy, later he has option on the app to report me to the company. If he mentioned to the company like my driving was unsafe, I have high chance, like let's say 30 to 40 chance to lose the job, definitely. If that happen 1, 2, 3, Uber say, okay, you are not a good driver. You are not putting us in problem because you want to kill our customer and this and that. So easily, they just deactivate my account. Sometimes they say, we're doing investigation. They can put you in investigation 6 months. You have children, you have rent, they don't care. They put you in that investigation. The most of the time, you want to come back. When they tell you, okay, make appeal. If you make appeal, what's going to happen? It's Uber and Lyft are those who punish you, and they are those who judge, the judge, who going to deliberate again. When you make appeal, later they send you, okay, we understand it's upsetting, but we are sorry. This deactivation is permanent. You lost your job.
Wow.
You cannot work no longer. And that happened in thousand driver in New York. We keep fighting. Last year, we made progress in that, because the union, now a New York Taxi Worker Alliance, they fight and introduce one bill called Intro 276. We win protection. It's not, even this one's not going to be enough. We keep fighting, because actually we call in the new administration to finance a committee who going to implement the bill. Because if they implement it, at least if you get deactivated, you have possibility to make appeal, and the appeal will be deliberated by an independent agency. Actually, we
That's
don't have that agency. What we keep fighting, we hope the new administration will help to implement that. That can help to protect more. Otherwise, for nothing, we will lose in our job. That's why you see my head. Every Uber driver in New York, you see the head is getting green because we work under high pressure, always, every single minute, every single ride. And those one we try, but we're still facing very tough situation in those company and with that policy.
and it sounds like that one of the things that you're talking about here, right, is the power that the company has through its software. There's not really an opportunity for a fair hearing for them. And so bringing the government in as like an arbiter between the worker and the company, right, is a way to create more fairness in the economy. How about you, Aaron? I know, you've been working, like you said, with the legislature to try to get, better rules for rideshare. Are there other examples where like kind of the union working with the government to help farmers out against big companies?
Yeah, we know that we have to work all together to make the food system work, right? We have to have coordination up and down the food chain and the system. The massive bottleneck that we face as farmers means that it's much harder for us to connect with consumers. So there's all sorts of ways that we should be doing and make those connections to consumers much stronger, right? Of all the food that we eat here in Iowa, I'll give you an example. Of all the food we eat here in Iowa, only 10% of the food actually comes from Iowa. Iowa is we think that we are the most abundant, productive state in the nation, yet all the food that we eat comes from somewhere else. And so
Think about the inefficiency of that too, right? Like, I mean, they always talk about how like corporate concentration creates these efficiencies in the market that it makes it better. But it's like if I'm sending my food from my state out elsewhere and then getting somebody else's food sent in to me, I'm like, isn't that inefficient? It allows for middlemen to make more money.
Absolutely. And that leads to that figure of the farmer getting of the consumer dollars that are paid for food, the farmer's getting less than 15 cents for it. So what should we be doing? Well, we should be building connections so that farmers can more directly connect with consumers in our communities so we can have local food in our school districts. We can have local foods in our food banks and our other institutions, and we can make it easier to build these connections because I think consumers want that. They demonstrate that they want to have this connection with the food that they're eating, and they want to support farmers who are independent and good members of their community. But it's difficult to do without an infrastructure. So building that infrastructure, building those incentives, that's something that we can do that would be an alternative to being a victim of a monopoly system that we do need to disrupt. We do need to destroy these monopoly in these tactics. At the same time, we need to be building a system that works for us.
That was I'll share a few thoughts in a moment, but I want to make sure we get you gentlemen out to your actual jobs in a moment. And so I want to pass it over to Amadou. Mr. Amadou, any closing reflections for our listeners and watchers about the fight you're fighting in New York City and what we've been talking about today?
By ourselves, we cannot do big thing because we work with companies who have the monopoly, who have the power. They can ever what kind of lawyer they want. They can buy the political people. This is the way how it's work in the country. So what we can tell whoever listening to us this morning, know that the first of all, before this war started, we was already impacted. The farmer was feeling the tariff that put on them illegally. You remember that. The customer, the same thing. As a driver, we was feeling it, and now the war come and make it more stronger on us. Meanwhile, those companies doesn't pay us enough. We don't make the money that we need for live normal life. Despite that, we're struggling. But what we need today is whoever listens to us. When you see us in the street as a driver, no, it's not because we just sitting behind the seat, behind the wheel driving. Everything's go well. We have a lot problem. It's not also saying you're gonna fix it, but understand us. When you hear us making our voice, making our case, we need support. We need you to know what we're facing. And it's, doing that, how? By, everywhere where you see situation, learn to know how it works. Just don't see us think everything's going well. You have problem where you are, where you work, and believe me, we have more than what you can imagine. So support us. Let's come together in every industry, in every dimension of work. Get united and let help each other because we
Amen.
all are living the same situation. Even if we are not in the same field, we live in the same situation. Because when the price of gas go up, you feel it, I feel it. When the food go up, you feel it, I feel it. When the rent, house, and everything go up, it's not only me that don't know color, don't know origin, don't know nothing. It go up and hit you, hit me, and hit everyone who live in the city or in this country. So let get united, work together, and when you see us crying, please give your support. It's highly needed.
So well said, Amadou. Aaron, you want to close this conversation out so we can get you to your workday?
Well, I just am so glad to have this conversation. There is a false narrative that sometimes gets manipulated, saying that urban interests and rural interests are so diverse and contradictory to one another, and it's really your fault and it's their fault, and unfortunately, this conversation illustrates that we have to work together to deal with these corporate concentration issues, which we face whether we're in New York City or we're in Allman, Iowa. And so, unfortunately, our differences get used against us when in reality we have
That's
so
right.
much in common that we need to capitalize in order to make a real difference. So
I want to make T-shirts with everything you guys just said and just wear them. Aaron, Amadou, we are so lucky to have had you on this morning. For
Thank you
me,
both.
your fights are the
Thank
future.
you.
This is how we take our country back from the oligarchs, take our country back from these monopolies, duopolies, oligopolies that are bleeding us dry, bleeding our families dry. And your fights in New York, your fights in Iowa are a blueprint for how we as a people in this country can start leveling the playing field of the little guys versus the corporate behemoths that want to tell us how to live our lives. So thank you both so much.
Thank you both for joining us. And I'm sure this will be the last time we have a chat with each
Absolutely.
other. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
guys.
Good to see you, Aaron.
And you guys feel free, there you go. Feel free to drop off. Max and I are gonna chew the fat a little bit.
Okay.
Oh man.
What an amazing conversation. Well, that's it. And that's what, it's so funny to me because Alvaro, when we were going around and talking to different groups of people, what I think you and I were most struck by was that it's like, there is really no divide
Yes.
in this country. Like when
Yes.
you're talking about people, like the real divide is between those who work for a living, those who produce, right? Actually create something of value. I got to tell you, I get so sick of economists saying that's like, oh, it's these middlemen. These middlemen are the ones that are creating value. What the middlemen do, right? The middlemen, maybe they connect people together. Okay. And that can be something of value. But what they're really doing is inserting themselves into a transaction. and they're taking the value of that transaction for themselves. And I think you see it in food. As Aaron, it used to be like, I love the farmers market in Des Moines, Iowa. It is one of the
I
best
visited it with
farmers
you
markets.
guys. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to see it. And it's like, but it's great because there are no middlemen in that situation, right? It is a farmer with his booth, with his products, and you, the consumer, walking by and something looks good to you. You look at it, you negotiate, a price. There's value to both parties, right? When we put distributors in between that basic transaction, they take a little more for themselves. They raise the price to the consumer and they lower the price to the farmer. Same thing for the rideshare company. Yes, they're connecting the businessman who needs to get across town, and the rideshare driver, but they're making sure that they're taking a little bit more. And each year, each time that they have more power, they're taking more and more.
And let me add, look, like, we do need transportation companies, right? We do need processors,
Yep.
retailers. Retailers I wouldn't put in the middleman sphere, but for the most part,
No, because
the small retailers,
and yep.
but like the middlemen, it'd be one thing if they were just doing their jobs, right? And pay, doing a service, whether it's bringing the farmer's product to the market or processing cattle. But what's happened over the last 40, 50 years is all of them have gobbled each other up.
Yeah.
And what they've created isn't a route from point A to point B. They have created a series of gates and choke points that let them control things. Let me nerd out for a brief moment.
Please nerd out, buddy. That's why people tune in.
Not sorry.
They tune in.
Pretty sure
they tune in to hear you nerd out.
No. Hadrian's Wall.
Hadrian's Wall?
You didn't expect it. You didn't see it coming. Then I came in and I just hit you with Hadrian's Wall. And by the way, I'm going to nerd out with him. The nerding out. Hadrian was hirsute. Hadrian had a beard. And so if you're looking at Roman, like a coin of a Roman emperor, and the emperor has a beard, that, my friends, is almost certainly Hadrian. Pretty fascinating guy. I'll let you Google him. But Hadrian's Wall was this wall in Roman controlled, what we would now call the British Isles. And when people hear that, they might think that it is a military defense structure, but it's not. It was actually a way to control commerce between different areas of the Isles and to create a choke point so that the Romans could tax, the Romans could control. This was not a wall that would keep, the crazy Celts or whoever they were north of the wall, or the Scots, or, those Highlanders, from invading Rome, because they would just step over that wall or climb over it easily. It was a way to control the money and the commerce flowing through that. That is what these billionaires are building with these meat packers, and with these other processors that are these are not
and the rideshare platforms
and the rideshare platforms. That's exactly right.
It's billionaire money that made the rideshare platforms grow.
That's right. And another thing that jumped out to me about this conversation is the way the platforms Uber and Lyft gamed this measure that New York City put in place to protect its drivers. Because I want to make sense of this a little bit, because if you're hearing about what the New York City, legislators did, it may not make sense at first. But here's the thing. In the same way that we need to be able to make food in this country for this country, so that the next pandemic hits, heaven forbid, but eventually it's going to happen, we can feed our kids. So we have subsidies in place for our farmers, and there are issues with those subsidies. They tilt certain ways, they drive production in certain ways, but at base, they are intended to make sure our country can feed itself, right? And pretty sure, I think 90% of people would agree we probably should have people making food in this country and growing food in this country that we can buy. New York City said, we need to have, taxis, or like we need to have something outside and in addition to our system of public transportation that helps people get from point A to point B, right? You're a parent, you need to take your kid to a doctor, your doctor's sick. You can't take that poor kid on the subway, right? Or if you have the resources, you're going to try to get them a taxi, you're going to try to take them a rideshare, and to get them to the doctor, to get them to the hospital. Heaven knows ambulances are prohibitively expensive. It is the taxi, it's the rideshare driver that, unless it truly is a life and death emergency, people are relying on. And so New York City said, these people are going out of business. We just watched a generation of taxi drivers for whom being able to get or rent a medallion was a generation shifting investment and opportunity. Those guys all just went out of business. And now these rideshare drivers, they got on the platform because, as Amadou described, they were getting these great bonuses. So they're like, of course I'm going to shift away from taxi. Or, oh, I just, defaulted on my loan for this taxi medallion, but I got this opportunity over here. They were seeing those guys go out of business, and they said, no, we got to provide a level playing field for them because they are working for these platforms. So we need to make sure that if they're online, they get a certain base level of pay. This is a way that New York City was ensuring that this important market actually stayed viable. And so then the platforms, what they were doing is they were artificially pushing people off the market, so it didn't look like they were there idle, because the New York City folks said, if they're idle for too long, you got to pay them, bud. And so they're like, oh, no, they're not idle. They're not on the platform. And what actually was happening is that they were locked out. And this is what you see time and again, is that these platforms get so big and get so fat on that money that they are completely unafraid to abuse their power, to screw over efforts by the people to protect these markets that are important to them. Let me just give you one quick example that's playing out in Louisiana and Arkansas. Really important fight down in Louisiana, Arkansas. And as you know, Max, my wife is from Louisiana, and I've been lucky to spend good chunks of time, not just in New Orleans and Kenner, where my wife is from, but also in some more rural parts of the state. And in lots of places in Louisiana, like lots of places in a big city, your healthcare, your closest healthcare provider is not, a primary care provider. It's a pharmacist, and it's more often than not an independent pharmacist, because a lot of the big dogs, the CVSs of the world, don't consider it profitable to serve those rural areas or those urban areas. So those pharmacies, a lot of those pharmacies are, CVS, for example, is owned by this vast insurance conglomerate. And these other insurers like United Health have these quote unquote mail order specialty pharmacies that, have a dog in the pharmacy fight. And so they're doing everything they can to bankrupt those independents that serve those working and urban and rural areas. So what do they do in Arkansas? What do they do in Louisiana? They said, hey, billionaire insurer, billionaire pharmacy middleman, which is owned by the billionaire insurer, you can't own pharmacies in our state. You got to be separate, because we need to provide a level playing field for these pharmacies, which provide a critical service. And again, this is, this is the one place where you can go to actually get a healthcare professional and say, oh, no, I don't think that medicine is working for you. Let's switch you over to something else. No, oh, no, that looks serious. I do think you got to go to the hospital, ma'am. Right? And so in Louisiana and Arkansas, some great legislators. And by the way, these are Republicans. All right. These are folks who are on the red side, the right side of the aisle, passed an amazing piece of legislation saying, well, you got to vertically disintegrate. And what did the insurers of the world do? What did the CVSs of the world do? They took the patient information they got in the context of what I believe, and I haven't gone in and gone in, I'm a privacy lawyer, so I haven't gone in and checked all the HIPAA boxes, but I strongly suspect is protected by either federal or supplementary state privacy laws. But no matter what, is absolutely covered by the, I think, sanctity of the patient-provider relationship. And they use those phone numbers to lobby people to kill these laws. And the Attorney General of
taking medical,
Louisiana,
let's just be clear about this. taking medical information
Yes,
and converting it to political information.
exactly. And I'm spacing on his name. Charming guy, have a lot of different political beliefs than I do, but he fights for the little guy. The current governor, former attorney general of Louisiana.
Oh, Jeff Landry.
Jeff
You're talking about
Landry.
Jeff Landry.
Jeff
Yeah,
Landry
so
and his AG.
he's
We're
a buddy of mine. No, I
rightfully pissed.
no. It's
Great guy.
Can I tell you a little?
Yeah.
Jeff
You met
thought
my
I
mom,
was.
by the way, but go ahead. Yeah.
Jeff thought I was conservative
Oh,
because
yeah.
of my positions. Like, and he was like, Max, we gotta stop these liberals from. And I'm like, but Jeff, I'm liberal. No. But that shows like the divide. Continue your story, and then I want to
Yeah.
play more on that.
But like, then Attorney General Landry, now Governor Landry, and his Attorney General were pissed. And they start investigating because why? Because the people of Louisiana and the people of Arkansas said through their elected representatives, we don't want this. We want pharmacies to exist. We don't want them to get gobbled up or driven to bankruptcy via foreclosure by these companies, out-of-state companies that are bleeding our folks dry. And what do? They abuse that power, just like they abused it for Amadou, to their own political ends, to their own bottom lines. And
that's
please go ahead.
So at the heart of what we talked about today is power, right? And then I really loved the conversation as it got to like, we all need to join together, right? Because it's like when you've got concentrated power on one side, and then you have dispersed power being all the little guys, right? And the little workers, who don't have that much power, like, but you join together and you can counterbalance that power. And when Aaron spoke at the end there, I really loved it because he's talking about narratives, right? And the narratives are to divide us. It's like it's used constantly to try to keep us from realizing that we have to work together to balance that power out. And I'm going to nerd out, so you talked about Hadrian's Wall, right? Which is a use of power. We're going to build a wall so that we have the power over this choke point. I'm going to nerd out and talk about Bacon's Rebellion. And because Alvaro's heard me say this over and
Max
over
Miller
again.
is the #1 Bacon's Rebellion super fan. I think he's a Bacon's Rebellion stan. Go for it.
I just believe.
Well, tell people what it is.
This is the story. I'm going to tell people the story here, but it's the story of America encapsulated in our early history. Basically, you had the colony of Virginia. It's under the King of England. There were complaints that former indentured servants had. So like the way that population was coming into Virginia at the time was that people would agree to have like 7 years that they would work for a king approved landowner, right? And that they would basically be forced to work the land essentially as slaves in order to develop this like untamed land of Virginia. And then once they were done with 7 years, right, they would be free, quote unquote free. And the funny thing was, this wasn't just Europeans who were on the indentured servitude. It was also Africans. There were Africans being brought over on indentured servitude contracts, so they would be free after 7 years. So you had low income people in the colony of Virginia who were Black and who were white. And then you also had a few slaves, ones that were not on, being brought over from Africa. But they all had economic complaints against the king and the people who controlled the land. It was a power problem. They couldn't make their economic situation work because all the power of the economy was held by these king-granted monopolies. And Bacon was actually a relative of like the governor of the state of Virginia, but he was so pissed off about this unfairness and all that, he started to rile people up. And you know what? It wasn't just the white folks that he riled up. He riled up the free Blacks. He riled up the slaves. And he got an army together that took on the power structure of the colony of Virginia. And it was so bad that basically the governor had to flee, right? And they like took over the colony. And it wasn't until England sent over the actual British army to like crush that rebellion. After that point, America started using a lot of racially charged language. It was after Bacon's Rebellion that then there was like, okay, number one, no more indentured servitudes for Africans, right? We're not going to have free black people hanging around anymore. They're going to be enslaved. And we're going to divide the whites and the blacks, and we're going to make sure that we control the narratives about what happens. And so that's the beginning of so much racial animosity in America. It comes from it, but at its heart, it was about economic populism. It was about the people coming together to take on power structures that hurt them economically.
That's wild.
And I think what we got to at the end there, Aaron was talking about that, right? It's like there's this constant narrative that we're different.
Yeah.
That we need to fight against each other, that urban is different issues than rural issues. But the truth is, there's so much that connects us as Americans who are not wealthy. And we should be joining together, regardless of ideas we might have about pop culture or about these culture wars, right? That is used to divide us so that we don't work together to take on the economic power structure.
Unfortunately, I completely agree with you. But
So fight for fairness.
So we got so for folks listening, we are so glad you joined. Honestly, I'm just so pumped that we had Aaron and Amadou on, and I feel confident we're going to continue these kinds of conversations here on
This is what
the
we
Fair Fight.
experienced at the FTC.
That's right.
We talked to people from different backgrounds, and we saw that they were connected.
Yep. And we're going to try and do everything we can to bring more of those bridging conversations to you folks. If you have ideas, bridges you want explored on the show, you can contact us at ask@thefairfightpod.com. We have our phone number, 920-WE-FIGHT.
920-933-4448.
You can
920-WE-FIGHT.
You can follow us, and please do subscribe at the Fair Fight Pod on X, on Blue Sky, especially on YouTube.
It's just at the Fair Fight at YouTube. Just at the Fair Fight.
At the Fair Fight at YouTube. Folks, we are so, I'm going to be thinking about this conversation for, honestly, a couple days. But thank you for joining us. We look forward to more of these, and please keep up that fight.
And follow us on Apple Podcasts.
Oh yeah,
on Spotify.
Thank you.
One of the things that we're doing with these live shows, we have produced shows that we're working on, which are a little bit different format than this, but we will make these live shows available through the podcasting distribution points, the Apple and Spotify, as well as YouTube. But then, keep following us so that you can get the updates on whenever we release a new episode.
All right. So, everyone, have a great day. Have a great Friday. Have a great day whenever you listen to this.
Enjoy your weekend. Bye, folks.